Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the accommodation on changing from last week to this week. I know we have a couple of people missing tonight just because of that accommodation, but this is why we record every session. So we posted after this evening's session, and people can follow up. We're gonna have another session on Thursday. So we're going to have somewhat of a shorter schedule tonight. We're gonna go over a couple of subjects. I did look at everyone's homework. We had a couple of people do a pretty good job of starting to break down the value propositions. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth with that tonight. I think we're just going to spend a little bit more time, and then we're going to shuffle up the next couple of weeks because we have some scheduling changes with the guest speaker that I'm trying to bring on board to give us a little bit more in-depth conversation around some regulatory things and some items I think it'd be good for you to hear their experiences around and some go-to-market strategies. So we're going to go over a few things tonight, a couple of topics, and then next week, or I'm sorry, next session on Thursday, we're going to start leaning into the narrative setting and talking about the pitch. One thing to go over tonight also is the final event. I've seen the venue in Nashville. It's going to be pretty cool. It's got a great view of the national skyline or a part of it, and it's going to be a great event. For those of you that can make it in person, that's great. We will have a hybrid kind of virtualized environment as well for those that can't. But we highly encourage y'all to show up for the event because it's going to be pretty cool. So if you're in the Nashville area on the April 27th, that'd be great. I am going to send out or put a link into the chat here for the Eventbrite. It'd be great if anybody and everybody would to pass that along to anyone else that you think might be interested. And also go ahead and sign up yourselves. And I'm going to pass this on through email to everyone else as well, but it's there in the link. So that's a RSVP to our pitch day event on April the 27th, where we will be competing for a cash prize. And I've heard the cash prizes are quite large. Hopefully I'll be able to announce those next week, but it's somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 total to be split up amongst the top winners. So, and I think with the numbers we have, probably everybody, all teams will walk away with something. So I think that's going to be really, really great. So without further ado, let's go ahead and step into the content tonight. As always, if you have questions, just kind of come off mute to say my name, say anything you want, just get my attention, or drop it in chat. I've done a pretty good job of being able to split an eye over there every once in a while and see the question and bring it up in conversation if I need to. But otherwise, I'll just kind of move along. I don't think we're going to probably even take more than what's left of this hour for tonight's session, and maybe a little less. It's an interesting topic of what we're talking about, but I'm going to save some of the detail for when we have the guest speaker, when we start talking about go-to-market strategies. But first, we're going to spend some more time talking about value proposition. So as we can skip over that, just gave you the agenda. So last week, before I jump right into this, we talked a lot about the customers in particular, and a lot of what it means to how to identify the customer. And over the weeks before that, moving from the problem and the solution, and then trying to figure out from the market and the customers of really, what kind of behaviors they may have, how to slice and dice who they are, where they are, and what are the biases that we might have to try to manipulate to get their awareness around our product or service. These are all very general terms, and some of what we're going to start talking about is a little bit more specific around go-to-market as it relates to the technology that we're talking about, specifically around medical devices, but also in the automotive space, especially as we talk to it in a couple of weeks, hopefully with a guest speaker talking about in depth about some of those regulatory issues or regulatory obstacles that you have to get through. So going back to just the regular things around the customer, once you understand the typical customer types and start to understand what we were looking at last week of what are they really experiencing, right? We try to put our empathetic therapist hats on. We started talking about how you have to put yourself in their shoes, how you have to build your awareness of what they're going through, how you have to start understanding the pains and gains that they might be trying to figure out. Then you can start building what will be the UVP, or the unique value proposition. And this is, in simplest terms, is why your business is unique. It's there in the name. And the reason to do business with you and not with your competitor. That's the biggest key factor of this. But it can't just be a generalized kind of thing. It has to be very, very focused. So even though it's very simple to define, it has to be very deliberate in its structure to ensure that you're unique and that you set yourself apart. And you might not be able to set yourself apart in everything you do, but certain factors of what you do, you have to do better to have that compelling reason for your customer to want to choose you. Now, certainly you can be the best of breed, or you can be the only one in the market. or you can be delivering into a very specific niche where you don't have a lot of competitive space. But that's not something you can be resting on for very long. There will always be something that comes along to try to do something better. Even if you have protections in intellectual property, which we will talk about a little bit tonight, that doesn't mean it's forever. Patents only last 20 years, right? And then things are in the open space. We do have protections around what you can get done in those 20 years, especially in the pharmaceutical side of things. But the idea there is like, it's only a finite time before you have the hedge over the market, right? So you have to continuously figure out how to keep yourself unique, and value proposition setting is how you do that. So here's where unique value proposition sits for a company. It's in this kind of bin here. So it's what your customer needs and cares about. And that's really what we talk about when we talk about pains and gains. And we'll cover that again in a slide coming up. The pains and the gains are how the customer is reacting to the environment they're in, what is giving them joy or what is causing them pain. And then is what is also about what you do really well, right? Which it could be a lot of things that you do really well. But where those two collide is where we're starting to talk about that unique value proposition. Those benefits is another word for UVP that the customers are very specifically looking for. And then what your competition does really well. And that alignment, and if you look at that kind of, where everything is starting to align on everything else, you should have a more significant area where you're doing something better that meets the customer's needs more than your competitive market is, right? So the competitive layover part there is just a very small piece of the market that you have, and that's the goal there, right? So I'm going to do everything as much as I can better than my competitors while still delivering to the expectations and to the benefits of my customer. And where all those collide is my value proposition. Now, these things become misaligned all the time, right? So the customer's needs change. Now you take that bubble and it starts to float out to the top left, right, or left out. So it's starting to float out away from the overlay of where you two meet in the line. Or you start to do things not as well as you did because technology starts to age, or technology, and better yet, with the principles of law of how things progress and get better, technology starts to shift and get miniaturized and better and more efficient, more effective, and everything else. So it starts to even get better with your competitors, or your technology gets left in the dust. So you're not doing things as well. Your bubble is now starting to move away, or your competition starts to eat your ground, right? So it's coming up because it's doing things better than you are. Maybe it's a new patent, or maybe they found a way to get around what you're doing and deliver something truly disruptive to your side of the market. So these shifts happen all the time. You have to constantly try to figure out how to make sure this really alignment stays intact as their expectations, meaning the customer's expectations, change. And as your business continues to evolve and you do things better and better and better, and then also as your competition both responds to your customers' ever-changing needs, as well as your evolvement of your company, because they are trying to keep track of you as much as you're keeping track of them. If not, they're not much of a competition. So the UVP, the unique value proposition, falls in that space in between. And as with everything, it's very, very dynamic. It's definitely not static ever. So we've talked about this a lot, and it's something that it's never, you can never talk about it enough, right? Because it's so simple, it's so basic, but it's really the most important part. And that there's two terms here in these sentences that I think are really the most important parts. The first part is about the gain. So customers that are drawn to your business looking to gain something to you by using your product or service, right? That is something we talked about last week and a little bit the week before. If your product provides something to them that is going to give them a positive benefit to their lives, then they are most assuredly going to give you consideration and want to buy your product, or expect or order your product, or ask for your product. It might be something that they request through another provider. Maybe it's a healthcare provider or someone else. Or maybe it's a channel partnership development thing where you have an expectation set to your vendor that they need to do business with someone else because of the quality that they deliver, or because of the service they deliver, thinking about the tracking of products and stuff like that. So you might want to provide certain gains through that value proposition setting as you're working with business partners as well, right? So when you're working with your customer about something, you want to draw attention to yourself, draw attention to your business because you're going to provide some sort of value that's a positive to them or a gain to them. The other side of that, which is drawing them again because they're going through some sort of pain. This could be a physical pain in the instance that we're talking about with our 2 intellectual property areas related to cancer and cancer prevention or cancer curation, curing cancer, right? So these are definitely things that are causing physical pain, but we also can talk about that same context when you're missing out on product delivery because your supply chain has been compromised because you're getting counterfeit products in there. We have an intellectual property that deals with that specific thing in this program right now. That is a very painful thing for channel partners that cascades downstream in very negative ways. Well, if you're a service provider that can come up with a solution, right, then you're solving problems at multi-segmented levels. It's kind of an omni-channel solution. You're alleviating a lot of pain. Well, here now the context is how do we deliver both? That's the ultimate value proposition. So in that same example, if I'm delivering a product that is ensuring the product in its raw form, in its componentized form during the delivery process through multiple channels is more secured, and I can rest assured that it's coming through in a higher level of quality and on a better time schedule and so on and so forth. Not only am I getting my product better and higher quality, with less breakage and loss, I'm able to deliver on products quicker and maybe even take on more sales, which makes everything great. So now I've had a pain alleviation with a bonus of a gain creation, right? So creating gain and alleviating pain. If your product or service can do both, that's fantastic. These are different areas that you can slice and dice against competition as well. So what I want to start stressing here is these are terms that you use in your narrative. We can add to your life by doing this better than the competition in this way, right? So, looking at these things, these value propositions, as you break them down, these very specific areas that you had in that canvas, the value proposition canvas that you could worked on over the last week, did work on last week, is breaking those things down so they're actually narrative points of saying these are the things we do and these are the things we do better than our competition. We can cure cancer at a higher rate or faster rate because of this. We are able to do this at a lower cost than our competition because of this unique value proposition, XYZ. So these unique value propositions are not only part of why you can draw your customers, these are also part of the narrative of how you sell to them, obviously, and also the narrative that you sell to your business partners as well as investors and also channel partners. So if you want to try to work with a third-party payer or some sort of insurance provider or some other healthcare provider or a different OEM in the case of automotive, that's what you also have to sell to them. So all of what we're talking about over these last several weeks, and then what we lean into next this coming Thursday is working on this narrative, understanding all these pieces and parts of the problem, the solution, the customer, the market, and the value proposition. These are that whole first part, that top half, almost all of it, of that canvas that I showed you at the very beginning to give you a fully, really rock solid outlook or overview of what your business concept is before you start delving into kind of the money side of things, right? So you kind of get a good outlook of the viability of your business by saying, oh, well, okay, I got a good problem that I know I can build a solution around. I know these customers are feeling the pain, and I know this is how they are and what they're looking for and their expectations. I know how to reach them and what their behaviors might be in my favor in order to build awareness with them. I know what their pain points are, and I know what they're looking for from gains. And I know the other benefits that I think I can do for them better than my competition. The only thing I have to get to next is how much to price it at, right? And how much revenue I can generate and how much profit I can generate. And then once you have a profitable business, there's a saying, and it's generally true, although there's an exception to every rule, that a profitable business will not go under, right? So after you figure all these things out, imagine how important it all is, because you can't do all that. You can't get to the price points until you figure out how to get to these other parts, and you can't do all that and sell this and get investments and everything else without understanding all these pieces, okay? So I know I've drawn on a lot about pains and gains and value propositions and customers and marketing problems and solutions, but hopefully these last 4 classes leading into this one really has planted enough seeds, and I've done enough fertilization for you to understand that this, and actually better yet, for y'all to really have started to build a narrative in your head that we're going to start applying to a deck starting next week, right? And that's also why we've done a 60-second elevator pitch. And that's also what's part of your homework going to be for tonight. So we'll move down that here in a minute. Okay, so just to go over the best tool that I have to provide, it's kind of the industry standard. Everyone uses it. I don't really, there's not a better tool for this to graphically display or to really talk about this exercise. And I'm not going to go into it in depth, but just to explain it, breaking these things down and understanding on the right side of really, this is your customer and these are the gains that they're looking for and these are the pains that they are experiencing and these are the jobs that they want to get done. If you start then going and looking at the other side of the square side, and saying, great, okay, these are the gains that I can deliver to you, that I can create for you, and these are the pains that I can alleviate or relieve for you, and these are the pieces in my product, the specific things in my product or service that are going to get that job done. When you have those 6 components or those 3 and 3 components matching each other, then you've got your business viability from a value proposition perspective nailed, right? And so you can take that and put that back in front of a customer and say, is this what you're looking for? And if they say, that's it, that's great. You are off to the races to the next step, at least. If they say, no, I don't think so, then you refine it and check back. Then you can also validate those with more and more customers as well. So these Canvas tools, just as an important side note, are really, really good about providing the ability to go back to the person that you're talking to and say, hey, this is how I think I can represent what we're talking about here, and then get that validation. So this is a really important tool, and everything we've talked about should make this a little bit more simple to see and really effective tool for you to utilize. Okay, so let's just go through this next few steps of the UVP discovery process. All right, so we've done some of this in step 1 already and a little bit of some of the first steps. So conduct market research. Identify the needs, the pain points of your target customers. It involves analyzing the target market in depth, really getting out there, understanding the behaviors. We talked about that last week. That's the native and cognitive biases, looking at your own. It's about being empathetic. We talked about that in the first week and the second week, about looking at the environment as it is, or where the problem probably occurs, so you can understand what's going on, understanding what the problems that the audience is facing in that sense. So really conducting a lot of market research. But this is also not just conducting research around the specific customers. This is starting to really look at the market at large, because in this process, you're looking at understanding both yourself as well as the competition, right? So this is not just looking at the customer. You've done a lot of groundwork to do that, and that does feed into this, and it is important. But as I said earlier, after you've really defined specifically what the customers wants, this becomes your business narrative, right? It's not just focused exclusively on delivering specifically to the customer. This turns into your overall business narrative and how you'll execute on your marketing plans and everything else. So market research involves also just how big the market is, how many players are in that market, how many customers or customer companies could be in that market. If you're talking about patients or beds or just exactly, I mean, if there might be 600,000 worldwide, how many are in a specific geographic area that you're going to be focusing on first? These are the market researches that you really need to start off with when you're establishing your overall unique value proposition. You really have to understand the competitive landscape as well. As I said, if you don't understand the competitive landscape, they're going to eat your lunch. If they're not looking at you in the same way, you're going to eat their lunch. That's what you're hoping for. You're hoping that they're not as deliberate as you are and diligent as you are in understanding theirs. And when I'm doing competitive analysis, I'm deep into their products. I'm in LinkedIn looking at their executive leadership team. I'm in LinkedIn looking at their product development team. I'm in LinkedIn looking at their IT team if it's something very, very technical. I look at their physicians if it's something medical. I look at everything I possibly can to give me a leg up on understanding my competition. I look at the investments, and then I look at the portfolios of those investors to see who else they've invested in. I mean, I guess I could say that might be too far, but then I would also dare ask, can you tell me why that's too far, right? It's like, that's all intel. I mean, it's all information that can help me understand if they're going to raise money, and if that money they're trying to raise is for a bridge loan because they're in trouble, or because they really need to go get more money because they're about to hit the market in a way that I really need to pay attention to. I need to understand where they are in their pricing models in a market. I need to understand where they are in their penetration of a market, both from a timeline as well as a market cap perspective. I need to know where their product is. If I start looking at their product developers and understand how well they've done product development in the past and what companies they work for, I can understand really where their general direction might be for the next step of their products, right? If it's a software product, I download the software and utilize the software. There's no law saying that I can't. I'm not going to reverse engineer their product, but I'm certainly going to pay attention to it if I possibly can. So I do a lot of research on the competition to fully understand. Generally with my teams, I have them build large matrices that show exactly every, value proposition that we have documented, and then every value proposition that they can discover, or we can discover that our competition has documented, and then every feature set, maybe not to the most in detail, but certainly higher level feature sets of what they're doing in their product and how we're doing it, and then also a comparison of what we believe of how well they're doing, right? So, and sometimes we'll ask survey questions about the competition. So it's all about finding out how well they're doing and what they're doing, and then stacking that up against how well we're doing the same things. And then also the differentiation about what we're doing that they're not. And then looking at how we can protect what we're doing that they're not doing, right? So it's all about looking about how we do things better. Okay, so really identify your strengths. And I just said something a second ago about protection, and this is where that's very, very important. So analyzing your capabilities, your technology, your expertise, your talent, that plays a big part of it, especially in the areas that we're talking about here. We're talking about cancer treatments out of St. Jude and Vandy, right? We're talking about world-class individuals that are, Nobel, parts of groups that have Nobel Prize winners in science, right? So, and then we also have automotive expertise, beyond imagine, right? In some of our industries that we have here in Tennessee, and what we're talking about here, we're talking about a lot of great technology and a lot of talent, right? If you have a lot of talent, you need to make sure that what the talent is coming up with is protected, right? But you also want to make sure that it differentiates you from your competition. So capabilities, technology, expertise, resources, these are all very important, unique advantages that you may have over someone else. Wow, I just realized that the camera's way off answer. Oh well, let's move over this one. Okay. So once you understand those and catalog those and identify all those all become unique value propositions as well. And then you need to start trademarking those. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the coming weeks. We'll talk about regulations, but going more in deep in those. And those are trademarks, registrations, copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. And there's other things too. There's NDAs and things like that as well. But sometimes those can be a hindrance. Sometimes a patent path is not actually the thing that you want to do. Sometimes that can restrict you from entering into a market. Sometimes a trade secret and doing licensure is based on that, is better than anything else, where you actually keep things somewhat in a black box. So I think, there's a variety of ways to slice protection, but the bottom line is, like, when you figure it out, make sure that you protect all that technology that is the core differentiation from your competition. Okay, document your UVP. This is big time, right? So you want to make sure that you are documenting your key benefits of your technology to your target customers. Like I said earlier, this becomes part of your narrative, right? So your market research, your competitive analysis, your strengths, all this becomes part of your narrative. Start building a marketing plan around this. Start building a narrative around this. Start building a basic statement, a unique value proposition statement that says, we do this and we do it better than our competition, and this is how, right? Get an understanding of that and document that as part of your narrative. And then test and refine. Test it with your customers, get their feedback, and then make adjustments to your value propositions. We said this earlier, things will naturally adjust. Your customers are going to be the first people to adjust more than anything else, and it happens all the time. So when you do this, then you will see that as they adjust and utilize your product, then also your expectations around what their expectations have to adjust as well. All right. Okay, hang on a second, everybody. Okay, so testing and refining. There's all sorts of tools. You can utilize surveys, very simple tools. You can do focus groups. You can just get out there and talk to your customers. You can talk to your business partners. You can do blanket open-ended research into your market. You can buy data. There's all sorts of ways to figure out how well you're doing and gain feedback in the marketplace. And then when you figure that how well you're doing, that's when you start making adjustments. And you start to continuously, or you don't start, but you continuously improve your value proposition to ensure that you're always meeting the expectation of your customers in the market. All right. So enough droning on about unique value propositions. I think I've spent enough time and planted enough seeds, which is a good context for this image here, because this is really where you're going to move to the next step, where you're hopefully going to see some things start to grow, right? So you started off with just that basic concept, just a flash bang of an idea, and you really need to plant the seed to understand where you want to go with it, but there's a lot of groundwork that you got to get to between here and there. And even though we see a lot of intellectual property come out of these labs that are very tangible, there's a lot of data around them. They've gone through a lot of trials, and some are even in or about to be in, or even, you know, just having some consideration in the FDA process on the medical device side, or moving towards an MVP on the technology side on mobility. There's still a long way to go from the business side, right? They might have the technology there, but do they really have the business narrative? And let me first say, I've been around technology forever, right? I love technology, and technology can sell itself, but only to a certain extent. Going back to that image that I showed you about crossing the chasm with that early gap in there between the innovators and early adopters and the early majority, where the gap was between the early adopters and the early majority. If I stick the whiz-bang technology in front of somebody on technology, on the table, then yeah, there, out of 100 people in a room, there certainly will be 10 to 15 people that are going to just go take my money, right? But that's only that smallest percentage of, you take that 100 people to be that whole bell curve. The other 85 people are going to be on the early majority, late majority, and the laggards. They're not going to buy off that quickly. So if you want to capture that first 15 people and be off to the races with your $15, if $1 a piece, that's great. But I want more of that $85, right? So if you have the technology, that's great. But selling the technology is completely different. Even if we're talking about licensure and working with other organizations just on licensing your technology from a trade secret or anything else, that might be an easier way to go. But selling those is like selling franchises. They don't necessarily sell themselves. You do have to convince them of what the model is and why they need to buy those and why they would need to do those in order to ensure that the relationship and the transaction is worthwhile to everyone. And it could save lives, and that's a great byproduct, and that's certainly why we would be doing this. But it also can't cost more than it, more than it's worth, right? And it has to be financially, fiscally viable to do that. So getting an understanding and getting the investment and getting the technology where it needs to be to make it a viable thing fiscally as well as technologically is an important thing. And a lot of times that has to do with understanding the whole part of the business and going to market with a strategy that makes sense based on a lot of information that we've talked about over the last several weeks. So let's move it to the next gear. Let's talk about how now we've got a good understanding around who we're selling to, why we're selling it, and what we're selling it. Let's talk about where we're going to move it to from a marketing perspective, right? So this is the go-to market strategy, and this is pretty universal for any business type, although in this conversation, we do have some very specific things related to the areas of life science and automotive, smart automotive that we're talking about here. But in its essence, and these are two ways of saying the same thing, but I like both these action words. An action plan that specifies how a company will reach target customers and achieve competitive advantage, right? So it is a true action plan. It's a living action plan. So it's something that your entire team marches to. It's something that you continuously evolve because it's living. It's something that's continuously informed by market analysis, competitive analysis, customer analysis, everything you can possibly think of, and measuring yourself and measuring your company. And it is an action plan that you continuously execute upon. It's also kind of a structural blueprint. So I think these words are very action oriented, but they're also slightly different, right? So a blueprint is more of infrastructure structure around the purpose product blueprint for delivering a product or service to the end customer, taking into account some factors of pricing and distribution. So you have your action plan that is really, okay, here's what we're going to do. and what we're going to do. But then there's this infrastructure blueprint plan where you have all the pieces that show the exact, every piece of the distribution, every piece of the model, right? Where all the journey of the customer, all the journey of how raw materials come in and how finished goods go out, right? So it's everything related to it, both the structure as well as the plan around execution. Okay, so there's a process around this as well. So similar to the other thing, identify the target market. For life science and healthcare, considering factors such as the patient population or healthcare providers that would benefit most from your product, size and growth potential of the market, and the competitive landscape. Can't say that enough, right? So again, everything is about understanding the market. Same with the go-to marketing strategy. Here, again, this is less about the individual customer and much, much more about the market itself. This is about the players in the market. This is about the businesses in the market. This is about the competition in the market. This is about the market value. This is about how much opportunity I have in that market, right? So this is really understanding the ins and outs. This would also be the regulations of that market. Regulations in the market might be different from another place in geographic areas. So what we do in the United States is different than what we do in Europe. So this is understanding those as well. All right, so so now that we identify those, we're going to dig really deep into understanding what's about the market. So understanding the needs, the preferences, the behaviors of those markets, understanding doing that and going into in depth of working with key opinion leaders, working with subject matter experts, working with our business partners, working with affiliates, working with individuals that like with the FDA, working with consultants that used to work with the FDA or the DOT or DOE, depending on what you're in, but going to the sources of data and looking at the individuals that might have the most knowledge and digging really, really deep. They might also be publishing papers with these individuals. They're doing research with these individuals. A lot of what we're talking about here is based on intellectual property that's in their current research orientation right now. And that's a lot of valuable information. Not only does that give you a lot of resource information, but it adds a lot of validity. It's like a bona fide of where it's coming from. It's coming from a major research facility. It's being researched upon and developed by these major world-class key opinion leaders and scientists. So it's got a lot of weight to it. We need to understand, how that affects the market and what other things are in the market and behaviors and preferences and needs around that market to give an overall structure of how we're going to penetrate that market, right? So we have to know it ins and outs, top to bottom. When we start building a plan is a clear narrative of the value proposition that resonates with your target audience, as well as a mix of marketing tactics that are most effective at reaching your audience. You should also consider the budget and resources, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you got to put together a marketing plan. So we're talking about, in some cases, a medical device or a treatment for a cure for cancer or any one of the things we're talking about. And some of the times people are like, well, I'm not going to really put a marketing plan together. Well, it's not about necessarily putting TV commercials out there. It also is about just understanding who you have to sell to with this clear narrative of this value proposition that resonates with whoever your target audience is, your beachhead of do that. So that might be going to conferences, going to the HIMSS conference, the largest healthcare conference in the world, which is happening later on this month, right? And actually having a booth there that showcases your technology and showcases your revolutionary disruptive breakthrough cure for cancer. These are things that you're going to have to put yourself out there. So no, it's not like we're going to go show our ad in the middle of the Super Bowl and halftime of the Super Bowl, but we are going to be at this healthcare conference, and we're going to be at this healthcare conference, and we're going to be at this healthcare conference, and we're going to build our reputation around our product and utilizing these periodicals and utilizing these journals and utilizing these methods. So these are all part of our marketing plan, because this is how our target audience gains information. If I know that my audience is going to get it through this specific medical journal, I'm going to put research papers through that medical journal. I'm going to make sure that my product is showcased in a way that they'll see it through the channels that they usually consume information. That is a marketing plan, right? So it's not all about, social media and that kind of networking. A lot of times it is about search engine optimization, regardless of the product. That's always good, because people do look at Google, especially with AI and different things like that. So these are all new ways and forms of doing search engine optimization. I can't imagine how it's changing right now. I need to dig into that, but that's certainly still part of it for most businesses. But just know that it's not the traditional marketing types for every business, but every business does have marketing, right? And then therefore every business needs a plan. Okay, business development. This one is huge. This is something that I do quite a bit. It's probably my number one business skill that I deploy all the time. It's about building, I keyworded one word here, relationships. Building relationships with key stakeholders. And this is, healthcare, or this might be an automotive, this might be an OEM partner, this might be a charging station partner, it might be just a distributor of parts, or something downstream or something upstream. This could be somebody from a regulatory agency. This could be someone that used to be in a regulatory agency. I have colleagues that I call upon all the time that are former patent reviewers, former patent attorneys. I have a really good colleague, trusted colleague, that I utilize a lot and push a lot of people to, that is a former FDA reviewer, right? In the breakthrough technology areas, right? So when we have medical devices, I know I can point those people towards him, give them very valuable information to prepare for the FDA process. Sometimes these people are extremely expensive, but that's because they have experience and now they've entered into the private market to share that experience. So it's important to build relationships with these individuals. It's important to build a relationship with the FDA. If you're going to go through the FDA, you need to build a relationship with the team that you're going through, because you want to be able to respond to them in a very professional and timely manner, so you can keep the process going. You have a very antagonistic kind of relationship with anybody in your partnership level and anybody in your channels, it's just not going to be a very smooth working relationship in any regard. In some cases, it can really, really mess you up. So relationship building, business development, this also includes your customers and with your sales and everyone else in between. So business development is a big part of your go-to-market strategy. Okay, so this is all highlighted because it's all important, and I'm just going to choose to kind of read it almost verbatim. Ready to approval is a critical step in bringing in a high-tech to market. You'll need to smudge a product for clinical trials and obtain approval from regulatory agencies such as the FDA in the US, or the European Medical Agency and the EMA in Europe. For transportation, this is also like FAA and Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, the FCC. It could be a variety of different government agencies that regulate federal policies and standards. If you are going to be a product that flies in the sky, you are going to have to apply to FAA guidelines, regulations, and restrictions. There's no doubt about it. If you're going to be some sort of vehicle moving on the road, you're going to have to apply to several organizations, agencies, to be on the road, depending on what you're doing, right? So there's no getting past regulatory and regulations. And most businesses, especially high tech, that are going into the areas that we're talking about, has some sort of regulatory body that they have to get some sort of approval from. And that can be from basic electronics with UE, or it can be high-level FDA 3-year de novo clinical trials, right? So it can run the gambit. I'm working on getting a guest speaker to talk very detail about these things. I'm positive and confident I'll be able to do that probably by next week. So we'll go into this more in depth. I'm not the expert in this area, I have some experience, but I'd never like to talk about this because I'm not the expert. Just know that this is a very big part of going to market for a lot of what we're talking about. And then launch. This is really always what you're trying to get to, is the end game, which is not the end game. It's really the start of the entire book or novel that you're writing here, which is chapter 1, which is launch. I mean, if you think everything before that was chapters, it's mostly just a preface. This is really where things, no pun intended on our automotive side, but where the rubber meets the road. After you've reached, some sort of regulatory approval for whatever you've done, or you've gotten all your ducks in a row, you've built your execution plans, you've got your marketing plans, you fully understand your customer and your market, you know what you're doing, right? You got your execution and marketing plan in place, you got your channel partners in place, you've built everything you need to do, you just launch your product. You also start to understand where you need to adjust. You're starting to build PR plans and the advertising and social media marketing, and you continue to build awareness and drive sales growth. So that is where you're at. You're launching the product and you continue to do so. Every single day after product launch is a little new piece of stress. It's definitely like having a baby. Every day is something new. No one writes a book about it, although there's 1,000 books about it. Just like having a baby, there's 1,000,000 books about how to raise a baby, and no one really knows the right answers because every baby is different. Every business is different. You will find out what to do every day. So what I try to do is give you as much information as I possibly can around what could happen, so you can start thinking about things when they do happen. But none of that stuff happens really major until you launch a product. But that also is one of those things that I found in my history generally is the scariest day and the best day of my life, or the several days, excluding more personal things. But from a business perspective, it's always one of those days where I wake up a little bit scared about the day's going to bring, but mostly excited. And maybe when I was younger, I don't know if it's more excited and less scared, or less scared or less excited and more scared. But it's usually a couple of emotions on those days. And then the last part of this process is measure success. Nothing we do is a one-time thing with a business, right? If it was, you would either do two things. You'd fail rather quickly, which is somewhat nice sometimes, or you would be rich rather quickly, which is always nice all the time, right? If you build a product, get sold, you exit, all within 12 months, good for you. That doesn't happen very often, but that's awesome. If you try really hard and fail within 12 months, that really rather happens. Usually failure takes years to fail at, get to the point where you give up on something. That's hard. But if you don't measure yourself to understand when you're failing, how you're failing, and where you're failing, or how you're succeeding and why you're succeeding, then you really don't have much control of your business. And therefore, you're not executing on your plans very well. So looking at your business from a perspective that it needs to be measured, both as it relates to easy looking numbers like how well we're doing in sales, how well we're doing in marketing, how well is our message doing in other regards, how much uptake are we getting from when we send out messages and do different things, when we send out emails to the doctor's list or the hospital administrators or to our insurance providers, how well are we getting from responses, simple things like that. But also, how are we doing on delivery? How are we doing in our distribution? How are we doing in our pricing and financial models? How are we doing in our growth strategies? Everything should be measured in a business to ensure that you're being healthy and that you're continuously making profit. And that also means understanding and measuring where your competitors are and how you stack up with this, all of which you're doing to try to measure how effective and efficient you are. And then where you need to change, refine your strategy, right? Keep refining it, keep evolving it, keep making it better to always achieve better results. So those are the key words there: key metrics, effectiveness, refine, achieve better results. And understand the underlying part there that you need to be able to adapt your strategy in response to changes, because everything is always changing. Change is constant. That doesn't change in business terms any more or less than it does in real life terms. Change is constant. So if you're out there and you believe that this is a simple process, it's really not. It's no more simple or anything or basic and straightforward than it is developing a brand new technology at the lab bench, right? That takes time, it takes a lot of effort, and sometimes things happen like that. And yes, and sometimes in business, some things are lightning strike, moonshot, really great things that happen very, very fast. But for most businesses and most technologies, it takes some time to get it right. It takes some time to get it next to perfect. It takes some time to convince somebody to pay you for it, right? So the idea here is to make sure that you've done all your research, you have built your narrative, and that you get to a point where you have a plan, then you execute upon that plan, and you measure your success ongoing from that point forward. Okay, so hopefully from this point to now, you will have an understanding, and I think most of the people that will be listening to this and watching this in the recording, we're going to talk about this again on Thursday, has a good understanding of what your primary elevator pitch could be. You should have a good understanding of what your problem is. You should have a good understanding of what your solution is. And when I say understanding, it's not about what the research personnel and the IP holders gave you on a deck. What I'm saying is that problem statement, that solution statement. You should have a basic simple sentence or two about your customer. You should have a basic simple sentence or two about, or at least coming to that, about your value proposition. We do this way, we do it better than so-and-so. And I want you to put all that together. So your homework, if I go the right way, is to now get rid of the idea of an elevator and just try to keep it below 2 minutes, because what we're trying to do here is stack up the first part of your pitch, okay? That'll be part of your deck. So what I want is a good 2-minute pitch that includes your problem, target market customer, solution, unique value proposition, and just a go-to-market strategy, super high level. We plan to go to market by partnering with X, Y, Z, right? We plan to go to market by going to this conference, blah, 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 you know, or we're going to work with these specific providers or channel partners to penetrate this market. Something simple, very simple statement. And go ahead and take a stab at it, and we'll work on it again on Thursday. But what I want you to do is start crafting kind of that first 2 minutes of what will be your sales pitch or your presentation pitch for the pitch day at the end. You're going to have about 7 minutes to make the pitch. This will probably turn into your first 2 or 3 minutes of the pitch itself before you start talking more in depth about your solution. So right now it's just high level. And so we'll go in more depth when we have more time. We'll talk about that. Okay, so that's your homework. That's it for tonight's session. As always, we have office hours on this coming Friday. We have another session this Thursday. I'll send an email out when the recorded session is uploaded to YouTube. I'll also send an email out to all those that weren't able to make it tonight. Hopefully we'll have more people on Thursday, but other than that, I'm concluding the session for this evening. I'll open it up real quick for any final questions. And if there's not any, then I appreciate your time, and we'll see you Thursday. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take care. See you on Thursday.